Children and women now make up nearly 60% of refugees and migrants crossing the border from Greece into the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. Sarah Crowe is the UNICEF's Chief Crisis Communications Officer, and we chat to her now on the line from Brussels. Good afternoon, Sarah. Thank you for your time on the South African Broadcasting Corporation News Desk.
Thank you very much. I'm in Geneva, but thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. The worst migrant crisis since the Second World War. Speak to us of some of the implications of this current surge we're seeing in the proportion of women and kids on the move.
Well, as we started to see from the beginning of last year, it was mainly men. And as the year moved on, in the middle of last year, 2015, it was about 1 in 10 of those on the move was a child. And you know the story of the tragic death of baby Alain was sadly one of many. As the year rode on, we saw more and more children and women coming over into Europe in desperation. Now, in February, taking into account the figures from January 2016, we're looking at 36% children and roughly 24% women. So it's been a huge uptick in the last few months, and we expect it to continue as children and families leave war-torn and conflict-ridden areas in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. We know that millions are out of school in Syria, and as you heard in your earlier report, there are already millions of refugees in Syria's neighboring countries and more coming into Europe. So this puts enormous strain on the child protection and monitoring systems in Europe as well.
Yes, and with a spike like this, of course, Sarah, there are obvious dangers for children, abuse, exploitation by smugglers and traffickers and so on. But one wants to get an understanding of what actually happens to these children when they land on foreign soil. They survive this dangerous crossing over the sea, and then what? How are they processed? Where are they housed, and for how long? And is there any attempt to reunite them with families if they were separated from parents during the crossing?
Yes, indeed. The great majority of children, of that 36%, are, of course, with families. They crossed over into Greece, mostly, some into Italy, but primarily into Greece. And they simply want to continue their journey until they get to their destination countries, such as Germany and other countries, Sweden and Northern Europe. And they register in Greece and in the Balkans as they move their way through the border posts is Gebgelia and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. So it is really this kind of river, if you like, of humanity making its way to safety. At every step of the way, UNICEF is involved and other UN agencies and NGOs are involved in trying to support children. We have child-friendly spaces that are areas where children can simply just be children again, can chill out, can play, can draw, have psychosocial support if needed. But most of them are really spending a very, very short time in each of the countries they're transiting through. So all the way up through, the Macedonia, into Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, Austria, and so on. It's an extraordinary exodus, and this increased proportion of children and women means they are not only at risk at sea, which we've seen just in the past month. Around about a third of all those who die at sea are children, and then once they're on land, they need to have proper protection systems in place. What that means in practice is that they're integrated, they're given accommodation with their families, they're pulled into the welfare systems in European countries, but all too often it takes too long because the protection systems and monitoring systems are simply overstretched. When it comes to unaccompanied minors, it's a somewhat different picture.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We are running out of time. That was Sarah Crowe. She's the UNICEF's Chief Crisis Communications Officer, chatting to us on the line from Geneva.